Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast, the podcast dedicated to healthcare security, safety, and emergency management. If you are involved with a healthcare security program or desire to be, this podcast is for you. Join the conversation as we discuss the issues that matter to healthcare security professionals while leveraging the expertise of healthcare security thought leaders and experts in personal development. And now, here's your host, Brian Hamilton.
Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast. I'm your host, Brian Hamilton. Today is Wednesday, January the 15th, 2020. Today, our podcast is sitting at around 400 downloads in 7 countries. So again, thank you for the support. Connect with us on social media just to stay up to date with what we're doing. We have a Facebook page and we have a LinkedIn group as well with some really exclusive opportunities to participate in the podcast. You can also connect with me directly on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and it's really easy to find me. I'm the only Brian Hamilton. That's Brian, B-R-I-N-E, on all of these platforms. On today's show, we're joined by Mike Hodges. Among other things, Mike is an active blogger on the topic of workplace violence, which our conversation is going to center around today. I encourage you to take a look at his blog. The links will be in the description. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get into the show. Thanks for joining us, Mike. Let's start off by learning a little bit about you. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your career?
Sure. So I started off my career in the United States Army back in 2003. Spent 8 years in the Army doing a variety of things. And once I got out, I started looking around for something to do in the civilian world while I finished my undergraduate degree and fell into a frontline security officer job at a hospital in Athens, Georgia, and went to school, worked, and before you know it, I started getting interested in healthcare security, specifically in workplace violence in healthcare and trying to understand and mitigate violence in the healthcare environment. And that has grown from being a frontline security officer to manager and director now of the department as I finished my education and continue to grow with the organization that I currently work for.
All right. And what was it was there anything specific that caused you to want to stick with healthcare security once you got involved?
Yeah, I think, it's a couple of things, really. I think, so healthcare security is just an incredibly unique subset of the security industry. I was not interested in, sitting at a guard shack and checking vehicles in and out of a facility and that type of work. I was interested in the dynamic nature of healthcare security, the interactions with people, the protective services that we provide in real time, especially in dealing with the aspects of violence that you see in a healthcare environment. It is such an incredibly dynamic environment, and we have the opportunity to serve people who are serving people. And so we care for not only patients in our facilities, but we care for the care providers that provide for those patients. And that, I think, is a uniquely service-oriented role, which was very important to me. And it provided the kind of daily interaction and change that I was interested in. Always something new, always something interesting, always a new problem to solve, a new opportunity for problem solving to be applied. So that was really what kept me interested and has kept me interested to this point.
And you talked a little bit as well about your interest in workplace violence. So I know you've been busy, among other things, with your blog, which can be found for everybody listening at proactivesecurity.blog. Can you talk a little bit about your blog and what prompted you to start this? Where do you want it to go, and what can we expect to see?
Yeah, I have no idea what prompted me to start a blog. I'll be honest with you, Brian. It was a fly by the seat of my pants decision. I said, hey, you know what? I've got something to say. I'm going to try to put it out there and see if other people want to listen and have a response. And my ultimate goal was really just to create kind of a space, and this is something you and I have talked about before, but to create a space where healthcare security professionals especially have the opportunity to talk about ideas, to talk about best practices, to share the things that we are doing in our facilities that are special, unique, different, and offer those to a larger community so that those good ideas can be taken and applied more broadly across more organizations. I mean, we have just a tremendous opportunity in our specific subset of the security industry to really make a profound difference in the lives of the individuals that we touch on a daily basis. And the only way we're really going to get better at the things that we do is by creating environments in which we can share ideas, we can challenge each other on those ideas, we can grow with each other through the vetting of those ideas and make them useful across our entire industry, not just for ourselves.
You've done some writing about this outside of your blog as well. So you wrote an article a while back in the Journal of Healthcare Protection Management, and you talked about the concept of the strategic security officer, which was also the title of the article. What is the strategic security officer, and can you expand on this a little bit and explain the concept?
Yeah. So this is a concept that's really near and dear to my heart when it comes to my perspective on security in general, but specifically healthcare security. So I stole this idea from the United States military, so I got to give credit where credit is due. The General Charles Krulak is the guy's name. He came up with this concept called the strategic corporal. He's a United States Marine Corps general, put this out in the late 90s, I want to say 1999. And it was the idea that we have to understand that our frontline leaders in the United States military are making decisions in the context of modern conflict that have strategic ramifications for the entirety of our national foreign policy. And that's a big statement to make, and that's a big statement that General Krulak made at the time. But what he was trying to say is that we have to start preparing these individuals to make those decisions more effectively. Well, I think that concept is incredibly applicable across any environment in which a single individual has the opportunity to make a decision in the moment under stress with little time that has the potential to have ramifications across the entire organization. And I think frontline security officers, especially in the healthcare environment, absolutely have that capacity. They encounter the full spectrum of tactical challenges in the span of an 8 or 12-hour shift, whether it's a customer service issue, a traffic accident in one of the parking lots. It can be a theft of property. It can be a lost or missing child. It can be a abduction of a child. It can be active assault of someone in their facility, whether it's domestic violence. It can be threats. All of those tactical challenges can occur at any moment, at any time in a healthcare environment. And those officers, oftentimes, when they're encountering those problems, are doing that alone, and they're doing it in a way that they have to make those decisions very quickly and under stress. And so what we have to do as healthcare security leaders is to start equipping them for that role, to give them not only the behavioral skills to deal with the tools that we equip them with and the policies and the tactics and the techniques and the procedures that we want them to follow, but also the cognitive skills to make larger decisions, to analyze more effectively, to connect what they're doing at any given moment with the larger mission of the organization and with the larger mission of the healthcare security department. How are we going to do that? And it's through a couple of different ways, whether it's scenario-based training, through professional development education. IHSS has done a phenomenal job setting up progressive certification programs that provide a phenomenal base framework for developing that kind of larger strategic picture for these officers to be able to make better and more effective decisions. And a lot of it's about teaching them how to make effective decisions, not just what decision to make, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely it does. Now, one thing that you touched on as well was, and it's also the reason why we were able to connect, was IHSS. Now, can you discuss a little bit how being involved with the association has been beneficial?
Sure. So I've been a member for a few years now. My predecessor in my current role turned me on to IHSS, and I started probably like most people. I took the basic, healthcare security officer certification, and that was my very first introduction to IHSS. I became an actual member shortly thereafter and progressed through the certifications through the supervisor level, and I'm working on my CHPA now. And the biggest benefit to me has been, especially through the membership, the just enormity of resources that are available through the association, whether it's the guidelines, whether it's connections to other healthcare security leaders, like the way you and I were able to connect, whether it's just the general information that comes out, the research that the foundation puts out is phenomenal, in connecting you with a larger view of the industry and really giving voice to a lot of those best practices that are out there, and being able to connect to those, whether it's individually to a practitioner, a fellow practitioner somewhere out there in the industry, or whether it's through the resources that are available online. Or, of course, you got the conference as well, that and different webinars and things that are put on. So all of those resources are just tremendously beneficial to staying connected. Anybody who wants to work in this industry has to have a heart for continuous education. We need to be constantly learning. And IHSS makes that a lot easier by connecting you to all those resources.
Awesome. Now, you touched on a couple of things there, too, about some of the resources. And actually, I'll probably get to that in a little bit. But I'm going to just kind of lead in with a question about something that was in your blog. Now, in your blog, you noted that there's differences between the threat assessments, risk assessments, and the vulnerabilities analysis. For healthcare professionals not necessarily involved with security, how do you define these three?
Sure. So I think there is a lot of crossover in the way that people treat those three words. Risk, threat, and vulnerability. So, the risk is definitely something we hear a lot. Risk assessment a lot, and it's really just a situation that involves danger or exposure to harm. Right. When we look at vulnerability, we're not necessarily looking at actual harm, but we're looking at a set of circumstances that creates the opportunity for harm, that creates an opening for that risk to apply itself. And then when we're looking at, threat, we're looking at an actual individual or a subject or a particular person or thing that is presenting a direct opportunity for risk to present itself. And I think, talking about the foundation research, I think Sarah did a great job. Sarah Hinkle in her recent foundation research on threat assessments did a fantastic job kind of differentiating this a little bit. She talked about, risk analysis being a very numbers-based process. It's a very formal, kind of straightforward analysis, very mathematically and data-driven. Versus a threat assessment, which is a far more deductive process, and it's an investigative process. So when you look at the risk assessment process, you're looking at a process of applying knowns and information and data into a very logical, algorithmic process to produce a risk value, versus a threat assessment where you're investigating the nature of a situation presented by an individual or a thing to try to come up with that deductive reasoning associated with what's the level of threat presented by this individual. And then when you look at that vulnerabilities analysis, what you're trying to do is basically a gap analysis. You're trying to say, okay, based on all the security measures that I have in place, whether that's connected to my physical security program, whether that's connected to my patrol program, whatever that looks like, of all those measures in place, where are my gaps that allow for a vulnerability to present itself? And how do I fill those gaps? How do I fill those vulnerability gaps and make the organization safer and more secure?
Okay, now do you have any success stories that you can share where you've applied some of these principles in your facility?
Sure. So workplace violence has been my absolute passion for the last several years. And over the last 5 years, in my organization, we have applied multiple types of risk, threat, and vulnerability analysis to our workplace violence prevention program. Several different tools, whether that's a protective intelligence investigative process that we've applied to understand threats more effectively. And that's something that we adapted from work done by the Secret Service and some of the processes that they've been able to publish and share with the public for protection. We utilize risk and vulnerability analysis, of course, on an ongoing basis to look at the physical infrastructure of our security program. And then also we're starting to get heavily into utilizing bedside violence risk assessments, which are actually clinical assessments. They're conducted by our clinical partners, but we use the values that come out of those violence risk assessments to give a better predictor for violence. And over the course of the last 5 years, we've actually been able to reduce violence in our organization by 51%. We've been really successful in applying these tools in various ways to drive the actual acts of violence against healthcare workers in our facility down over half now, and we're continuing, to move down further and continue to suppress those. I'm a firm believer that violence can be prevented. We've got to really change the mindset to be more proactive and preventative in nature. And those tools help us do that. They give us those early warnings so that we can act proactively instead of reactively and actually prevent the violence from occurring.
Right. And as far as training is concerned, is there anything that you've implemented with the training of your officers that really focuses on them having that proactive approach as well?
Certainly. So one of the tools we use, we call a security threat assessment tool. This is something that we've been working through and working with for a few years now. We actually were recognized by Vizient, which is a large healthcare coalition, for innovation because of this tool. But it's a bedside threat assessment process that our security staff lead. So our clinical staff may say, hey, we've got a particular issue here, whether it's the patient or a family member or some other third party, that we need security to take a closer look with. And we take this collaborative approach of pairing our security staff with our clinical partners. We may pull in social work, we may pull in other resources as necessary, and take that in the moment bedside threat assessment process and look at what that individual, the level of threat that individual may present. We've done a ton of work with equipping our security staff to lead that process. So when we do that bedside threat assessment, it is our frontline security staff. It's not me going over there. It's not a manager or a supervisor necessarily. It's that frontline security officer who's able to lead the nurse, the social worker, the nursing supervisor, all these folks together through this process and make that analysis effectively, and then hand it off so that we can work through larger mitigation plans. We've put a ton of work into that, into the risk assessment process. We do a lot of education on, of course, all the basics, whether it's use of force, less lethal weapons, that type of thing. But we put a lot of time and energy into professional development. So we'll do a lot of scenario-based training, and I think that's really where you create an environment where officers have an opportunity to think for themselves and make decisions and be safe in so much as we're not going to have actual harm, because this is a scenario-based training environment. And there's opportunity to fail in a way that allows us to learn from that failure in a way that's going to be proactive towards building a more effective decision maker on the end state.
And as far as your scenario-based training, is there an opportunity, and I'm not sure if you do this already, but is there an opportunity to integrate your clinical staff into that to kind of have that perspective and help them understand the decision-making process for your officers?
Absolutely, and we do that. So depending on the type, we had a program going for a while that was recently rolled back, and we're kind of readjusting and retooling. But we had a program going for a while where we would actually go to the skills day process for our clinical staff and do that scenario-based training with them. So we would talk them through, because we have a very robust workplace violence education program for our clinical staff that our staff teach. And so then we go to the skills days training and teach and put these scenarios in front of the staff going through the skills day training process and say, okay, so what would you do with this scenario? How would you incorporate with security? What would you expect from security? This is what security would provide. And that gave a tremendous opportunity for us to build on that. Now that program is currently has been retooled and is incorporated in other areas now. But we do significant scenario training. What we've done now is added an annual escalating behavior class to our clinical staff's annual training process. And so they come to the security department, and our security staff teach a annual class about escalating behavior, de-escalating responses, and then go through that kind of scenario-based and physical hands-on scenario-based process with them, so that we have that now on an annual basis with all of our clinical partners. And that's been tremendously impactful in helping us get to that 51% as we continue to suppress violence in the facility.
Awesome. Okay, now I know, Mike, I know that you're on LinkedIn, obviously. You have your blog. Can you just let us know what are the best ways to reach out to you? If you could just give the full URL for that blog, that would be helpful as well.
Sure. So definitely LinkedIn is a great way to connect with me. I spend an inordinate amount of time on LinkedIn, which is not necessarily a good thing, but you can certainly connect with me there. I just recently created a group on LinkedIn for the blog because I wanted to copy you and what you've done with the podcast, which has been phenomenal. So I created a group for the blog, and that's another great forum to connect with me and to discuss. The blog itself is proactivesecurity.blog. And that'll get you to it. And we're excited to connect with anybody we can. I really do want to see the blog itself, the group on LinkedIn, really connect with industry professionals in a way that allows an opportunity to open up conversations about the topics that we're discussing. Working on one now that's going to be coming out first of next week that's really focused on violence in healthcare, and that's going to carry through to a larger discussion on workplace violence. And I know that's a key focus for a lot of us right now, and I really want to see some folks get connected. So I would love to see people there.
Excellent. And if you do have a chance to go on Mike's blog, make sure that you subscribe for the email so you can stay up to date with everything that's happening. All right. Thank you so much, Mike, for doing this. I appreciate you taking the time, and I look forward to doing this again as well.
My pleasure, Brian. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for joining the conversation today. Join us again next week when we have a new guest and a new topic. In the meantime, engage with us on social media to stay up to date with the current events. We have a LinkedIn group, we have a Facebook page, and you can connect with me directly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Take care.